All right. Welcome to episode 19 of Sketchy Talk. And today we're with Mary Jo Ernst. She is a creative that wears many hats. She has been teaching sketching and ink classes in Chicago and the White Lake area of Michigan for the past 5 years. Regardless of the medium, whether it is fabric, paints, or mixed media, her creations are light with a sense of whimsy. Mary Jo currently resides in West Michigan and looks forward to sharing her talent and skills with the community and encourages everyone to try something new. It is never too late to make your mark. Her USK journey is she joined Urban Sketchers in 2016 and was a main volunteer for the USK Global Symposium in Chicago in 2017. She was an admin for Chicago 2016 to 2021. In early 2022, she co-founded USK West Michigan with sketcher Marcia Schrotenboer. This was a first chapter in Michigan. Around the same time, she joined USK Global Membership Team and is the regional coordinator along with team leader Isabel Santos for North America. Together, they mentor art groups to become official chapters. So welcome, Mary Jo. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks for the invite. This is very exciting.
So tell me a little bit about your artistic journey. How did you get into teaching artwork? Did that predate teaching urban sketching? Had you sketched? What started your sketching practice, and how did you get into urban sketching?
I've been sketching since I was 4.
Mm-hmm.
My first memory is my mom running outside and telling me to get out of the street because I was sketching our house.
Oh,
Um, and then when I got to high school, I was lucky to grew up in a very, very small town. My high school was only 99 students in West Michigan. And I was lucky to have a very talented art teacher in high school that really encouraged me. She gave me more of an independent study class. And
mm-hmm.
then I continued sketching through college. I spent a semester in Zagreb, Croatia, when it was still Yugoslavia. It was a
Oh,
communist
wow.
country at the time. And I did a few sketches there. So those are my first. I don't have my first urban sketch of the house. I do have a sketch of our parakeet Petey. I do
Oh,
have that sketch. But I would say my first urban sketches are the ones that I did when I was in Serbia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and in Zagreb. And then I kind of, I moved to Chicago, went into fashion design. So I sketched daily with my fashion design business. It was extremely helpful skill to have to convey the ideas that my clients would give me. I was able to quickly sketch them out, and we could decide right then and there if that was what they were looking for. But as far as like more outside art, I really didn't do very much. I have two daughters, and I went through a kind of a difficult divorce. I was a single parent. I kind of fell off the wagon, kind of lost my artistic voice, for a long time. And then I just kind of decided to get back at it. I was doing quite a bit of watercolor. I've always been an ink person. I started when I was a child with a Higgins ink, a bottle of Higgins ink, and a quill pen because that was what I could afford. And I just came across a Facebook post from Urban Sketchers Chicago. I was for a while thinking, how can I connect with other artists in the area? And this was probably like in 2000, early 2015. I saw a Facebook post of an indoor event that they had, and I thought I really want to go to this group. So that's how I started with them. And you ticked off my history with Chicago, but the first event was terrifying for me. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, tried to talk myself out of it, and then I finally made myself go in. And I can't say I loved it, but I made
mm-hmm.
myself go a second time, and then I really, really enjoyed it. There's a 3D element to urban sketching that I love. I would much rather prefer to sketch on location than to
Mm-hmm.
sketch from a photograph or something on a computer. So,
Well,
um,
there's something we've talked about it in specifically on this podcast about how there's an aspect of it aspect of mindfulness about it, and that it sort of is a practice that transcends sort of just drawing, and it's the experience, like the whole package of being able to see what's going on while drawing it, and then also hearing what's going on, the whole sensory experience you don't get drawing from a photograph, and it's
Oh,
almost like a meditation.
oh, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely a meditation. There are many times when I'm getting ready to go out, and I have a very short attention span, so I have to really set my intention. And I go over this in all the classes that I teach. Um, I allow my students to spend that time however they want to spend that time. You know, I would have to pack my kit the night before and set that intention. Sometimes it was, I'm going to work on values, or I'm going to work on my perspective, or I had a really tough week. I'm just going to sit there and have a snack and talk to people, just for the camaraderie. I give myself
Mm-hmm.
that space. I don't put a lot of pressure on myself for art. I'm lucky that I don't have commissions, a lot of commissions. I don't make my living, being an artist. So it gives me the freedom to kind of take it easy on myself and give myself that rest if I need it sometimes as an artist. And I never burn out. I'm all over the board with my art. I mean, I do
Mm-hmm.
pastels, I do oil painting, I do acrylic painting. I get bored really, really fast. So
Well, I think
um,
it's good to experiment too. I mean, I think that is one thing that as people get older, perhaps, and maybe it's because, when you were in school, but not college so much, but a lot of art programs in, high school and grade school used to have a huge sampler of different types of art that people could try out. And I think that's the only time you ever get that kind of wide berth of different types of art to try out. And so it's hard as an adult to try out a bunch of, because the entry level can be somewhat difficult of a bunch of different interests. If you decide you want to do ceramics or glasswork or painting, you have to get all the gear to do that.
yeah,
And so that,
I agree with that. I love, my favorite art is kids art. I
oh
try
yeah.
to I try to trade art with kids all over the world if their parents will allow me, because I just think there's a freedom there of imagination that for
Mm-hmm.
some reason our society just beats out of us. And I think your point about how it starts to specify as we get older, it's almost like we hit like 10 or 12, and we're supposed to all of a sudden just decide for ourselves what our futures are. You're going to be athletic, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
be STEM, you're going to be whatever. I think it's different now. We're allowed to be artists. When I was growing up, we were not allowed to be artists.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, we're almost forced to streamline ourselves into one thing. And then if that one thing isn't right for us, then maybe we're seen as a failure or whatever. I don't believe in the word failure. I think
Mm-hmm.
we just want to take a different direction. I think there's nothing wrong with that. So
Well, I think the big thing is perhaps the pressure, and maybe this is, I don't know if it's unique to, the United States, but the effort to monetize everything. So it's not worth pursuing if you're not monetizing it in some way. And I think that that's, one of the big problems in general with if you want to pursue music, or if you want to, because I think that being able to do a bunch of different things probably helps your career no matter what it is. And I love it when I see sketchers that do like accounting, or do, something that's totally quote unart related. But I think having that eye and, the ability to, even if the sketch is not good, you're still observing and looking at the world around you. And I think that enhances whatever else you might pursue in your life. And I think that I would like to see more of a sort of push to that,
I
especially when it comes to music and stuff.
I totally agree. I think, I have a sister who had both sides of her brain.
Yeah.
And she ended up having unfortunately, she passed away in 2006 from breast
Oh.
cancer, but she had a very successful engineering career. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, towards the later part of her life, she started doing like faux painting. She is an incredible interior designer. And she was starting to embrace that other side of her brain. But, the people that you just described that, are probably later in life, deciding that, it's very sad that we are just kind of shoved into these, the square peg. We're square, so we need to go in that square peg.
Mm-hmm.
It's unfortunate. I think it's getting better.
I
We
think
have
so.
we have amazing sketchers like Uma, and I
Hmm.
love her hashtag sketch like an engineer. I just think that's like the best tag
Yes,
ever.
yes.
And it's very inspiring. To me, it's very inspiring. I don't have that kind of brain. That whole side is just not there. It's like foreign to me. But I'm learning. My whole life, I pushed away that scientific community because I felt like I just couldn't compare or even compete. And now I regret, not trying to force have more relationships with people that are more scientific than I am. So there's a lot to gain from having a really well-rounded arsenal of art friends.
Oh, definitely. So, what led you to teaching? So, you started working with
Well,
Urban
I
Sketchers in 2016. Were you teaching before then or after then?
I used to volunteer my Mondays in the art classes of my daughters when they were in elementary school. So
Ah,
we did a lot of stuff there. And I brought in, I had a really phenomenal art teacher who had a little bit of sewing background. So I used to bring in some different types of projects, even though she was a teacher. I was a volunteer. We worked from classes that were kindergarten to sixth grade. So I kind of started kind of cutting my teeth there. I'm actually very big, I'm an introvert. And even just having to sit around the table and say my name to me is like terrifying public speaking. And I have um, spent my life after that, with all these opportunities that were given to me that I passed on to someone else because I was too fearful to do it myself. And then I just decided I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this because this needs to be done. So I think Urban Sketchers really, really, really catapulted me though towards teaching. It offered me a lot of opportunities. I started with doing some workshops at the Chicago Pen Show. They invited
oh,
Urban
uh-huh.
Sketchers. We didn't have a lot of interest in some of the other people in the group. So I kind of gathered bunch of people and I did that for a couple of years. And then I have to say, have to credit Alex Zonis from the Chicago chapter for really encouraging me to do more teaching.
Oh,
And we
she's really
co-taught.
wonderful.
She is, yeah. We co-taught. She has a gift for taking local members that are, that have some talent or have a unique voice in sketching, not the usual sketching that you see being taught. And she, kind of encourages us to, she helps put proposals together. She helps suggest ideas, and I think that putting the local talent or local members on the roster for seminars and sketch fests and stuff. I think that's really important. I think it's very important. I mean, you did it with your Ohio group,
Hmm.
and I just think it's very important.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, she really helped us when we were starting the Cincinnati chapter, and then with the summit as well. We talked to Alex, and she's had a lot of good advice. That's one thing that's nice how you said that you mentor groups to become official chapters, because I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the hardest things when a chapter's starting, and we talked a little bit about it before we started recording, is how do you get a group of people to start showing up to events regularly and encourage people to participate that don't feel comfortable at first.
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest challenge um, for some groups is obviously growing the group and
Hmm.
getting participation in it. There's so many nuances. I think one of the things that I do with my groups and Isabel does is we give them some strategies on reaching out to other groups, other art groups, to try to diversify their. It just seems to be the stumbling block that stumbling blocks that they have. So,
Yeah, it's exciting to see that more is happening with Detroit.
oh
um
yes, yeah. I just traveled there because sometimes face to face is the best way to handle it. You can talk to people on the phone or message back and forth, but I really think that being face to face really helps. We did that. I did that with Ann Arbor before they were
hmm
before they were awarded for official status. When I messaged them because I was new to the area. They've been around for a couple of years. Very, very low membership,
Mm-hmm.
but very dedicated. I mean, very dedicated group of sketchers getting together regularly. We had a little event and they had 32 people show up.
Wow, that's
And,
pretty
and
impressive.
one guy, it was really funny. One guy rides up on his bike with his sketch pad and he says, "I saw you guys sketching. I rode home and I got my art stuff and I came back to
Oh,
join you." I told them, I said, if you got 3 people in Ann Arbor, it's a big city, very,
hmm
very creative. I mean, if they can't grow in Ann Arbor, I mean, who can grow,
I
so
know it's such a huge art
it's,
community
it is,
there.
it is. Yeah, it is. It's one thing if you've got 3 sketchers spread out on one street, but if you've got 32 sketchers spread out over a couple of blocks, that's exposure, right?
Yes, yes.
So, and we had Isabel Santos and Marek come from Marek Budinsky. I have a hard time saying his name. Come from Toronto. They drove in from Toronto to
Wow.
to help. Yeah, we had kind of a little mini, regional 1 day event in Ann Arbor, and it was just incredibly successful. So
Oh, that's really
it
cool.
it kind of jump started a little bit more excitement. I think that it helps for groups to know that they're supported by local chapters. That's so important. I mean, you guys just have a new USK Jeffersonville
Yes, yes.
chapter, yeah. And one of the things that I kind of required from them was to reach out to you
Uh,
guys, and I think that relationship grows then, right?
oh, yeah, yeah. I
And
mean, we were just talking about one reason we've enjoyed doing our Ohio regional event was it made us aware and friends with other groups in Ohio.
right.
Because before then, I kind of knew some of the people in the Columbus group because I had met them at the Chicago Symposium, and they kind of gave us some advice when they were starting. They were approved a little bit before us, and one of the admins regularly comes to book festivals, and so I'm at a lot of book festivals for when different books I've illustrated come out, and so I kind of knew them. I didn't know anyone in Cleveland, and
Hmm.
it's been really exciting to meet all the people from Cleveland and more people from Columbus. We already knew the Dayton group pretty well, and a lot of people in Cincinnati and Dayton sketch with both groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you can get those groups together, plus I think, from a membership person, mentor perspective, if you
Mm-hmm.
start posting those fabulous events on
Mm-hmm.
your page, or even just like with us going to Ann Arbor, we've taken a train trip to Chicago to go
Oh,
to the
neat.
Chicago event, and I think our group is planning another one soon to do that again. I
Mm-hmm.
think when there are people sitting on the fence, like, I don't know if I want to join this group, gosh, they look like they're really good sketchers or whatever. If they see that, it's exciting, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
exciting. We're not just going to the same place every meetup. We're all over the place. And so I think it's exciting for people that are, hesitant. And
Mm-hmm.
then an important thing within a group to growing a group is to create a safe space for everybody to feel comfortable to share their work.
Yes, that's the
People,
biggest
artists
hurdle.
are vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one of the best things I ever heard was from Don Colley, who's a sketcher in Chicago. And we had some downtime at a seminar, 2 seminars ago. We were sitting outside, and I was just kind of interviewing everybody. What's the best thing about urban sketching? Just for fun. And he had a little 54-second clip that basically was, as artists were mostly introverts, we're very vulnerable, and usually the sketchbook is a personal thing, right? we don't we
Mm-hmm.
don't
Mm-hmm.
really, we keep it to ourselves, it's secret. But urban sketching allows us to open our sketchbooks and share our work, and that's very unique.
Mm-hmm.
It's his quote, but it's an idea that I think is just so, it just hits right to the root of urban sketchers. I mean,
Oh,
don't you
yes.
think? Yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, I think that I always try because there's a lot of people that are very intimidated when they first start because they are afraid that everybody's so much better than them. And, making them comfortable is something we're always working on because we don't want people to feel intimidated when they come and sketch with everybody. Encouraging them that it's not just the final result that, as we mentioned earlier, that's important, but it's also, the whole experience of drawing with other people. And obviously what you do, you might not think there's not much to it, but everybody sort of undermines their own, they don't estimate their work well. It's never as bad as they think it is.
Oh, exactly. Well, and what is bad? What is good? I mean,
Well,
it,
exactly.
there for me, there. I am one of those firm believers. There is no bad art. I mean, they're just if I had a brand new. She was actually a friend. Just had really. She said, I've never, sketched or painted before. And she took one of my classes at this little pumpkin patch or whatever. She did a beautiful little sketch. And I keep trying to convince her, she keeps saying, no, it wasn't that good or it was great. And I said, okay, forget about the artwork. We had it was right off of Lake Michigan, gorgeous
Mm.
sunset, golden hour. I mean,
Oh
what more
yeah,
do you
that's the
want?
prettiest
And I said,
time.
how did you feel when you were painting? Did you hate it? I understand, then don't take another class, then don't do it, find something else. She's an amazing writer and an Excel wizard. And she
Hmm.
said, you know what, I really enjoyed it. And I said, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
That's all that matters. It doesn't matter, unless someone's paying you to do that sketch, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And I think that's one thing that really encouraged me about keeping a sketchbook, actually, because I do work full time as an artist, and actually the sketchbook is sort of a no stakes. I don't have to worry about it going to a client, so I just do whatever I want, and that actually makes me like drawing more and keeps me from getting burnt out, because so much of what I do is very huge projects and very long days painting or whatever. And that sounds great, but it actually also is somewhat of a slog sometimes. Not to demean, and I'm happy to be able to do what I like to do all the time, but you can get burnt out doing that kind of work to that amount. But working in the sketchbook kind of revitalizes me and keeps me going on my longer projects.
Well, that's interesting. I think that's a really nice outlet and a necessary outlet for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everybody needs to have time to play and room to play. I think that's probably where teaching comes in too. So how often do you teach regularly? Like how often do you do workshops
Oh
these
my,
days?
oh my gosh. Okay. So, with the art center, I teach, I'm not teaching for the end of the year yet because
Mm-hmm.
I have some family commitments, but normally I teach about probably 6 or 7 classes at the art center during the year, but I also teach on the side at a library. I've done a library program. I'm doing another library program in 2 weeks,
Nice.
and it's all sketching. And then this year I was quite busy because I missed the pen show for sure in Chicago because I'm in West Michigan. But I was helping a high school friend start an artist collective. Actually, she started the artist collective. I was just helping her get some excitement around bringing art to this little tiny community, Ontonagon in the UP. Like no basis.
Mm-hmm.
So she hired me to come to Ontonagon, which is 9 hours from me. Um,
Wow.
yeah, but it's beautiful. It's in the Porcupine Mountains. I mean, hello.
Uh-huh.
So I went in June for a park event where she said it could be 0 to 4 people. We were swamped. It was insane. I brought my friend Marcia that I started the chapter with and another sketcher, Akalu from our group up because I figured I might as well pack my car with artists.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And I did another event, follow-up event then. That was a prep event for an event in September. And then I was in Chicago teaching at the Chicago workshop. Then I was in Toronto teaching at the Toronto
Nice.
10 by 10. Yeah, I was busy. And then I've taught 2 classes at the Art Center since then. So I teach regularly. It's very rare where I don't have something I'm doing once a month.
So do you mostly concentrate on, you said, pen sketching, or do you
Yeah,
also do
I
beginner type sketching too?
Well, I work mostly with soluble inks. I love
Mm-hmm.
soluble inks because they're so versatile. Not just in what they can do, but in the teaching aspect. They allow me to introduce a very quick sketch technique to beginners, and then you add water if you don't like it, or you add water to change it. It makes it instantly moody and dramatic compared to just a plain straight line.
Mm-hmm.
But it also is beneficial to very skilled artists because it gives you a really strong value foundation. Because it's monochromatic. That
Mm-hmm.
the technique that I teach is monochromatic. So it helps you with making decisions. It's when you work with solubles, it's all about layers. And so as you go, you make those decisions as you're making those layers, because water soluble is very unpredictable.
Yes.
It's just like people who use a lot of water with their watercolors. It
Mm-hmm.
pools in ways that as it's drying, you think, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing ever. And then it dries completely different, right? So then you think, okay, what's my next step? So that's the best thing about the soluble technique. And it really is beneficial to everyone, whether you're a beginner or an intermediate. So I always mark my classes as beginner, just so that the beginners, feel confident.
Oh,
Um,
that's really cool. I like the
yeah,
idea of labeling classes as beginner, intermediate, and advanced. That actually isn't a bad idea
well,
for.
especially for big events like yours or any big
Mm-hmm.
thing, because I think people forget that there are a lot of people, like in Chicago. We always have people that have never ever sketched before, and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, sketch seminar. I'm going to sign up for this, you
Yes,
know,
yes.
and then they get this awesome goodie bag that has all these supplies that they need. I always try to design the goodie bags to with a newbie in mind. There was a little
Uh-huh.
bit of watercolor, a little bit of graphite, a little bit of a permanent pen, a little bit of paper, so they didn't have to go out and buy hundreds of dollars of art supplies, to take the workshops.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we started. Alex and Barbara McCaffrey do the education for those events, and they were always really good at putting a couple beginner classes in there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to remember that there are a lot of people that are starting from ground zero for some of these events, and even a lot of members are starting from ground zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, you want them not to get discouraged. I mean, they may find out it's not for them, but
Right,
I mean, you don't want them to be discouraged off the bat, And I think there's a lot of people that are interested in sketching that maybe did it in high school. I mean, when I talk to
right.
people all the time, they had an interest at one time and then they just don't do it anymore and want to pick it up again. And I think that's a great resource for them to start doing it again and maybe kindling their interest again in doing sketching. And the thing I love about, that is picking that up as a practice is it's also like you don't have the level of finish that say illustration does or
Exactly.
yeah, I mean,
Right,
I think a lot of people are intimidated by that too.
right.
One of the interviews I did a couple months ago with my friend Richard, and he does a lot of plein air classes in oils, and he said, oh well, there's nothing intimidating about oils. And I said, well, it's not that it's intimidating, but the cost of entry is huge.
Yes, it is.
Not only is the paint expensive, but
Right.
it's not an easy kit to carry around casually. Like you have
No,
to deliberately go out and plein air with oils. It's not something like if you just have a piece of paper and a ballpoint pen you can do like we do with urban sketching. And I think that makes its barrier of entry much easier.
I totally agree. I think plein air is changing, and I love to
Yes.
change it. I was part of a plein air group,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a little. Sometimes it felt a little, not necessarily the group I was in, but it feels a little too serious for me. Like a simple setup is kind of like scoffed at. You need the umbrella and everything else
Yes.
to go with it. And
All the
what
gear.
what I'm love seeing right now is an acceptance of watercolors and sketchers. That sketchers are, to the point where some are even saying sketchers are welcome. To me, urban sketching and plein air is kind of almost the same,
Mm-hmm.
because you are sketching on location. We do have that in common. So it's
Mm-hmm.
nice to see that kind of breakout now, and I think it's great for everybody. I think it's a win for everybody. So
Oh, I agree. And so what are your goals with your own personal practice? Like where do you find yourself in your practice now and where do you want to go with it?
I that's actually a really good question, because you caught me at the perfect time in my life. So I wanted to teach more, which I've achieved. So I'm going to just kind of shelve that as far as where my energies go. I've been feeling like I'm kind of stuck in my approach. I do like working with solubles. I will continue to work with them. In addition to that, I do sometimes permanent ink with some watercolor. But I'm feeling like all my stuff is looking the same, and I'm ready for a change. So I'm trying to. From all these events I went to, have a ton of art supplies now, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I always have tons of art supplies from being a sponsorship person, but I'm trying to right now. I'm just concentrating on line making again, with just a simple pen and a piece of paper, and working on lines. Just that we were talking about, beginning the meditation, that Zen of the lines. I'm kind of just working on that right now, where I figure while I figure out where I want to go. I do have an acrylic class, little 6x6 miniature class, a yearly weekend, bi-week class that I'm kind of seriously off the painting wagon on. I need to get back onto that. But as far as sketching goes, I think I'm back to, I'm at a time in my life where focus is very difficult. I take care of my dad, so it's a heavy load sometimes, and I have to remind myself that I can't be like some other sketchers that I know that have much more flexibility. There's definitely some FOMO going on there, So
Yes.
um, and I have to remind myself of where I'm at, what my life is, and give myself the space and not put pressure on myself to always have to do sketch every day and do this and that. But I am just I'm getting back to the basics, I think, to then just figure out, what my next step is, maybe try some different things like collage and some other things, just to kind of jumpstart my creativity.
Do you
So
ever incorporate journaling into your practice?
I I don't maybe I should. I've been trying to do a little bit more of sketch reportage, but part of what I'm working on is kind of political, so it's difficult
Mm-hmm.
to it's difficult to post some of it, especially in our group, because I don't want to have a group that gets divided on different things. We have a big issue going on in our township right now, and I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to I was just at the state capitol in Lansing, and I did a sketch of inside one of the committee hearings, and I'm kind of on the fence whether I should post it or not, but it's kind of where my focus is right now. So
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah.
I mean, I've been actively trying to do more journaling with my sketching because, just as a storytelling teller and that sort of thing. And has been difficult. And as I've been working on the travelogue, I've had to actually embellish a lot of what I wrote because I don't instinctively write a lot. Um, Sorry about that. I'll have to edit that. I just sneezed. Um, but I've been trying to incorporate more also to kind of, already what I sketch tends to, you can tell where I was or that
Right.
sort of thing, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to memorialize a little bit more what's happening, not just day to day, but
Yeah.
kind of to remember that feeling.
I so identify with that, because I see these sketchers, other sketchers. We're back
Mm-hmm.
to the FOMO kind of thing. I see these other sketchers, and they just have all these wonderful, uh, you know, additions to their sketchbooks and stuff. And I'm not a well written spoken person. I'm actually working. I have a vocabulary app that I get every day. So I'm trying to increase my vocabulary to be able to be a little bit more expressive in my writing and in my speaking. I think we
Mm-hmm.
get kind of shortchanged or used to texting and shortening words and whatever, and that just comes out in our daily speech, I think. So I completely identify with what you just said about I feel like I'm kind of on the exact same path. I really do. I hear you on that completely.
Mm-hmm. I've been trying to record stuff more. It's hard because there's so much going on all of the time. And to sit down and write seems to take, because that's not necessarily my favorite thing, but I think it's rewarding at the end because it's so easy to forget different aspects and still not everything is recorded, but sometimes writing a little something will trigger other memories, as you try to, record things. And so that's kind of been my goal a little bit. So, and you said you've been interested in trying more materials. What are some materials that you'd love to try that you don't use now?
Well, we got some Neo pastels from Karen Dash in the bag in Chicago, and that was I really liked those. Um, I had some new pens that Pilot sent me that are real extra fine, and so they're great for just really tiny details. So it reminds me of me using the quill pens when I was
Oh
little,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
but much easier, and they have a really nice glide to them. So I'm that's what I'm using for my regular line work. But um, I think I just want to do more of mixed media type stuff where I combine some stuff, maybe some color pencils. But I always what I try to do with most of my artwork and also when I'm teaching, um, I like a combination of hard edges and soft edges, you know. And when I use the Impressionists or John Singer, Art John Singer Sargent as an example. Like when you walk into a museum and you're drawn to something, why is that? When you go up and you look at it, it's because he has hard edges and soft edges. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that makes a more interesting thing. So I want to kind of explore that a little bit more. I always
Mm-hmm.
have to have, I think, when I'm sketching some type of soluble aspect, unless I'm just doing the plain line work, because I like that. I like that. I like unexpected in my work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my work to look static, flat, contrived. To me,
Mm-hmm.
that's me personally. I like to have a little, wow, okay, that was kind of cool. Let's
Yeah.
take that. And next step will be either do something completely different next to that to give it some drama or interest, or maybe just move on to a different section and start a different section on the sketch with a completely different thing. So,
Yeah, I recently got my first fountain pen and it's water soluble. So I'm trying to decide if I like working with it or not.
hmm
I don't know. It's definitely like you said, it's got a bit more unpredictability. I know, and I love results of people that use them, and the lack of solubility. But I'm still trying to decide how to fit it into my practice because I prefer permanent inks for the most part. But I think that's one of those things. It's the journey. You find things that you really like to use and you keep using those.
yeah,
My background was for most of my kids' books has been painting in acrylics. And so I really like, most of my application for painting, especially like with acrylic. And then I've recently gotten into gouache. I've always painted with acrylic a little bit kind of like with gouache. So it's been opaque color. And I like playing with that a lot. Although by in the end, a lot of times I end up mixing art supplies that I don't know if it's necessarily that archival because sometimes when I'm working in gouache, I'm still not getting that color depth that I want, and I'll throw a little acrylic in, and I'm
right.
sure that that's probably not great, but
Well, I have to say, I just received your book because I ordered your Hadori book with a
oh yeah,
hippo,
mm-hmm.
and I actually ordered it for a young little gentleman, tiny little friend of mine, a cute
Oh
little Kai. I got it for him. He's 2 years old. He's a friend of ours, and I was shocked when it said it was in gouache. I would have never imagined the depth that you got with gouache. It was like shocking to me. Literally, I would have guessed it was a combination of markers and watercolor. I was really
well, the
surprised.
cover was done in watercolor, and then I decided because
hmm
I got some gouache, I really liked the texture I was getting with gouache for the hippo skin, but
Right. I see that.
sometimes for the backgrounds, I would lay those down in acrylic so that the gouache wouldn't mix with them. Because you almost have to have like gouache. The thing that's kind of nice about gouache is you can soften it later with a brush
hmm
and get those edges softened. And the acrylic, if you have layers of gouache, it will pull that color up from the bottom. And so sometimes I want a fixed surface, And so the acrylics actually give a lot more depth. I mean, almost everything I work on ends up being mixed media. I think that might be typical of any illustrator that does that, any illustrator doing, illustration for books. I think a lot of us end up being mixed media artists because we know the effect we want and we don't really care about how we get it.
Right.
So, there's people that work with a combination of, actually, if you've ever, I don't know if you follow the artist Chris Payne, CF Payne. He is
No.
a Cincinnati artist that he got famous doing editorial artwork. He's doing children's books now, but he did like the first painting in Time magazine of Obama when he got elected. He does a lot of editorial type illustration like that. And there's another David Michael Beck, who I taught with at Art Academy for a few years. They developed this mixed media technique that's super complicated, but it gets really nice results. I tried a painting that way once with my friend David just to see what it was like, because what they do is a very detailed pencil drawing, with all the values. So they do a pencil drawing that has all the values in, and then they will basically paint over it, like they'll glaze a color over it, and then and do some work in acrylic, and then they will glaze it with oils, and then
Yeah.
they will take an eraser and erase off the highlights, and then and I might be, this is not, so if you are wanting to create this effect at home, people that are listening, don't listen to me, watch some of the videos, because I think I'm getting it out of order a little bit. And then what they do is they take color pencil and they use color pencil on top of the oils, and then they seal it. Like it's a layering technique that they keep putting matte medium over to seal it in. And
Yeah.
and they throw everything but the kitchen sink onto this illustration, and it has a really beautiful result. Actually, in his sketchbook, Chris Payne, lately, he'll do a pencil drawing and then take a brayer and put a layer of acrylic over it, and then pull out stuff with color pencil. And it's a really neat technique, but it's very mixed media. And so when I use watercolors, for example, most of the time I'm not a purist, which I'm going to have to be careful, because I'm supposed to speak to a watercolor society in January. So I'll have to have some purist watercolor in because most of the time I do a mixed media technique with, sometimes I use a little bit of ink pen. Well, usually there's a lot of ink pen and then the color. And then sometimes I will mix acrylics in there, or sometimes I'll throw gouache in there. I don't use color pencils as much, but I do a lot of stuff sometimes with pencil, but it ends up being a lot of different stuff. And then in the case of children's books, a lot of times some stuff's painted separately and then compiled. Everything has to be digital at the end anyway, but a lot of times there's some digital painting on top of that with the kids' books. Mostly because with the kids' books, you're trying to get, illustration is kind of part of design too. So you have to be able to design the page so it works well with the typography that's added. And sometimes stuff has to move. Sometimes when you're working on the painting, for some reason, like you get a little bit out of control with the plants or something, and you have to move some of them to allow for type. So, and sometimes you decide you want to move stuff because of the gutter and that kind of thing. So yes, it's very mixed media. It's a long way of saying that.
The technique that you described with the pencil first
Mm-hmm.
is very similar to, there's a young, unbelievably talented artist, Mab Graves.
Mm-hmm.
She's in Indianapolis, and she does kind of the same thing. She uses Yupo a lot, and she'll do a full sketch with a sealer, oil
Mm-hmm.
paint, all kinds of stuff on it. So that
Mm-hmm.
is actually that kind of roundabout, not quite as detailed as the way that you described the technique that you just described. I would like to develop a plein air with oil painting or with acrylic painting technique where it incorporates more sketching like that,
Mm-hmm.
with a loose paint over it. That's almost like a painted sketch instead of a finished oil painting.
Yes. I
So
mean, I
that's
like.
something. Yeah, that's something I've been kind of thinking. I bought some Faber-Castell polychromos because they're oil based.
Oh,
So
uh-huh.
I can sketch with those first. Like just I bought a couple of like main colors, like a deep magenta, an indigo, and a sepia. I would just do a monochromatic sketch maybe underneath, and then try to add some paint. And I've done a couple samples, and I kind of think that there's some meat there that I can maybe try to to try to go further, explore further.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of on my list of things too to try. So
Well, yeah, and that's the thing that's fun is that's one reason I use the sketchbook too. A lot of times I will explore new techniques for kids' books. I kind of vacillate between um, doing books totally digitally and then working traditionally. So right now I'm finishing two books that the artwork's totally digital, but the next book I'll be working on will be totally painted, and it will probably be acrylic. I
I
haven't done a book in all acrylic in a while, so.
I like the analog aspect to the book that I have of yours. I do
Oh
like that.
yeah.
I really do. I did a children's book during the pandemic for a friend of mine, but I don't have the graphic skills.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to hire my friend to kind of help me do it. And it's before I started using Procreate. I am a kindergarten level Procreate artist. I don't do it enough to get it to stick, but I can see the benefits now of what I was working on before. If I scanned it and put it in, it would be much better. And for that, I used almost all Copic markers, Bristol board because it has a nice, bleed to it, and permanent pens like microns, and a little bit of pastel to give it some to cover some big spaces in the back.
I
But I wish
Procreate
I knew more.
Procreate's a great program. It's probably one of the most intuitive painting programs I've seen for people that have not used Photoshop, or I mean, there's all these other different painting programs that you can use, but Procreate has a very natural feel to it. As someone, have you worked in Photoshop or any of the other paint
No, I
programs
don't.
before?
No, I don't. I don't have any. I'm like, I really feel like I want to take Photoshop or Adobe something Illustrator
Mm-hmm.
class, at the local school. People are like, it's free on YouTube, but I don't do so well with it's free on YouTube kind of stuff. I don't
Wait,
know why, but I think I
maybe
need
there's something
like
about having the one-on-one that helps.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. It's definitely a goal for me in
Mm-hmm.
2024 is to learn more of the graphic art illustration side. I think it holds me back as an artist in many ways, and I think I'd have many more opportunities and much
Mm-hmm.
more fun exploring some things. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know,
And Procreate, I think, keeps adding to their ability to, I mean, a lot of illustrators use Procreate exclusively now, and it is a powerful, they have a new animation program dropping the end of November that looks really impressive. I really like Procreate, and I've enjoyed drawing in it since I have a Cintiq, and most of what I do is for publishing and stuff. I really love using my Cintiq and Photoshop, and I've been using Photoshop since Photoshop 88. I'm embarrassed to say.
wow.
I've been using it since it's, but when I'm teaching, I find that students learn Procreate more easily. I never remember how complicated Photoshop is until I'm explaining how to do stuff to someone else, because there's so many drop down menus and so many things. And when I say, oh, well, you have to go into this menu, and then there's a drop down menu in this one. And then like when I described all the steps, it's like, oh my gosh, if you haven't done this before, it's so confusing and it's not
Yes.
intuitive at all. Where I think that the interface that they've designed for Procreate is much better for beginners. Now, I don't
Well,
know. Oh, go on.
yeah, and for me personally, I mean, I just kind of started with nothing and I signed up for Skillshare so that I could take a couple Skillshare classes.
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
I managed to design a couple of fabrics for Spoonflower and
Oh,
doing,
neat.
the repeat patterns and stuff. But man, if you wanted me to do it now, I wouldn't even know where to start. I'd have to redo those classes. I just don't, like with anything we do, people say, I can't draw noses. Well, then draw 50 noses in your sketchbook. And trust me, you'll be able to sketch a nose. Yet, if you want to sketch a nose 2 months down the road, it might not be so easy,
Yeah, my students right now I'm teaching at NKU a class on storyboarding and narrative sketching, and there's a couple people that in every class that don't want to draw hands or don't want to draw feet, and I have to really coax them. It's like, just draw a scribble for the hand. You don't obsess about the hand. You draw the shape of the hand, and it's really hard to get them when they have this mental block about that type of thing.
Or it's just habits. It's,
Yes.
I have to say, I don't use pencil, and I don't allow my students to use pencil. We go right at with ink. And if you could see the faces of half of my class when I say we're not starting with a pencil and eraser, and they just like, oh my God, they have like, the trauma. And I'm like, okay, if you feel like it's going to cause you panic attack for the rest of your day, then please feel free to use a pencil. But if you could just try to just go at it, because
Mm-hmm.
I found with my first mark, it's my most expressive. And for me personally, if I draw it first on a pencil and then I try to go ink it, it's very
Mm-hmm.
static. It loses life. It loses life the way that I do. And I know lots of artists that can achieve that with starting with pencil, but for me personally, it just doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like I'm going through too many steps to get where I want to be. And so I usually eliminate. I very rarely use a pencil. And I also, pencil kind of gives you that out that I've got an eraser, I can redo this. And then I think
Mm-hmm.
you get stuck in trying to make it too perfect.
Yeah, it's very easy to kill your sketch by overworking it. And that's something in illustration that's always the hardest part, because I'll go back to the sketches, and even though they're loose and even though some stuff's wrong, it has an energy that is really hard sometimes to carry to the final illustration.
I see that. Yeah, I've had a very hard time doing what I think you do, because I think I'd get too caught up in having it be too perfect. And that's what I enjoy about the solubles and the techniques that I use, is it's just fast and dirty, and I'm done,
Yeah,
and then I move on.
that's really important. Well,
I
we've
never
reached
go back and rework. So
that's there's something to be said for that, because anytime I have a sketch and I go back and change something, I always regret it. Even though I'm like, oh, this looks wrong, and then I'll fix it. Then I'll say, well, why did I fix it? Because now it messed it up. It was fine the way it was. Just move on. And that's something
mhm,
that's one of the hardest things to learn. And I guess I could say I never learn it. And I think part of that push to noodle something is part of being, the illustration background, where it's like, oh, maybe if I just do this, but you sometimes lose something of that spontaneity, or
for
most of the
sure.
time you lose that. So, well, we're about an hour. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about your practice, or?
I have a favorite saying that I try to share with people, and it's very easy. It's, comparison is the thief to joy. And I use that in all aspects of my life, but especially with artwork. And I think I'm a fairly accomplished artist,
Yes.
and I still, in my mind, when I'm sketching, well, what would so and so do, or what would, how would they approach this, or what? It doesn't matter, because they're not with me. They're not sketching on my book. So I think that, as sketchers and as artists, and especially when you're with other people, or when you're scared of sharing something, is just remember that your voice is unique, and your artwork is unique. And, it takes a while sometimes to find that voice, but embrace whatever it is. I tried for years to try doing darker, serious art. And that's why I put that in my bio, that I always end up with a whimsical end to it. I finally just threw in the towel about 3 years ago and said, forget it. I'm just going to do what makes me happy. This is what makes me happy. I'm not going to sketch like someone else. This is me. And I try to stick to that. And then I try not to compare myself to other people.
Well, you should never compare yourself to other people, because it's not an unbiased comparison either. You can't you can't objectively compare your work to someone else's.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that's really great advice, to go for what gives you the most joy when you're sketching and in your practice. And if there's something, for example, if you like doing close-ups of lamp posts or something,
Right.
and that makes you happy, then do it. Don't be intimidated by people that take off different perspectives, or maybe bite off a lot more uh, of in a composition. do the, and do the best is perhaps not the worst, but I think, if the practice is giving you pleasure, I think that's the direction you should go in.
Agree. Totally agree.
So where can people find you? What socials?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook as Miss. Did you hear that?
It cut out for a second, so say it
Yeah,
again.
because I'm on my phone. I got a phone call. It's
Uh,
Mysterious Mannequin on Instagram and Facebook.
okay, well, and I will place the links in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me. This has been
Thank
really
you so much.
interesting.
This was really fun, and it kind of helped me. You caught me at a time in my sketching artist life where I really was ready for a change, and it's just been in the last couple of weeks, and so it's helped me kind of figure out my path too. So this has
Oh,
been
that's
very
really great.
therapeutic, very therapeutic for me.
Well, I'm really
So
glad. Thanks so
I owe
much.
you $180 for this hour.